Yo guys, what is up? Max in our video, and today we are ranking all of the ARPGs. Now, the reason I wanted to do this list is because one, I've been playing ARPGs for a very long time, and two, because there's a lot of players that have jumped into Diablo 4, not only as their first Diablo game, but also as their first ARPG game. So one, I wanted to give my opinion on a lot of the ARPGs that are out there right now because I've played a lot of them, not all of them, but I have played a lot. And two, maybe you can use this tier list as a guide for what other ARPGs you could check out if you really like Diablo 4 but feel kind of done with it and want to try other games in the genre. These are the games that I'm personally going to be recommending and how I would rank them. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let's get right into it. So to start us off, I have played a lot of ARPGs, but I haven't played all of them. I have not played Undecember, mainly because I've heard it's very pay to win, so I can't recommend that. Diablo 1, I haven't played. Diablo 2, I have played through the campaign. I haven't played through Endgame. I only played Diablo 2 when it was in the, remastered version, so it's hard for me to give like a concrete opinion on that game just because one, I really enjoyed it, but I didn't play it until very recently and I haven't played that much of it. Book of Demons, I've never heard of. Warhammer Inquisition or Inquisitor, haven't played. Vikings, haven't played. Warhammer Chaosbane, haven't played. Titan's Quest, I haven't played, but I will be checking out the new one that's coming out. They just announced Titan Quest 2, which looks actually awesome. The original Torchlight, I haven't played. Van Helsing, I've actually downloaded on my Xbox a while ago and never actually booted up. V Rising, I have played. Just don't really think it's an ARPG. I don't know why. I just downloaded this tier list maker. I just wouldn't put it in as an ARPG. Grim Dawn, I have played a little bit of, but just the very beginning. And Lost Ark, I probably have 10 hours in. Not as much time as I would like to make it a concrete tier list video. So the games that we're going to be talking about here are Diablo 3, Diablo 4, Diablo Immortal, Last Epoch, Minecraft Dungeons, Path of Exile, Torchlight 2, Torchlight 3, Torchlight Infinite, and Wolcen Lords of Mayhem. So we're starting low, and that is with Wolcen Lords of Mayhem. Now, I'm going to be putting this in the D tier. This game launched in a pretty rough state. I have heard that they've made some changes to it, but when I first played through it, I experienced multiple game-breaking bugs where I literally could not progress my character. Eventually, they did get that sorted out, but I just never really returned to the game. I enjoyed my initial time playing it, but it seems like there was just so many issues with it. I have heard that they've turned it around a little bit, but I still just wouldn't recommend spending money on it because of how many other amazing ARPG games there are to check out. The next game I'm going to be putting in the D tier is actually Torchlight 3. Now, I loved Torchlight 2. It's one of my favorite ARPGs. I grew up with that game. Torchlight 3 was a big disappointment, big miss. I do think they turned it around a bit with Torchlight Infinite, but of the Torchlight genre, I just wouldn't recommend Torchlight 3 to you. I barely made it through the game and just wanted to play something else when I was playing Torchlight 3. And lastly, in our D tier is going to be Diablo Immortal. Now, Diablo Immortal is fun. I enjoyed the game. However, once you get to endgame, the pay to win starts to come into place, and I think Diablo Immortal is probably the most pay to win out of any of the games on this list. Torchlight Infinite does have some pay to win stuff, but not nearly as bad as Diablo Immortal. If you're going to play a Diablo game and you're looking for the Diablo Immortal style, I would just recommend Diablo 3. It's just a better game, and you can get the full package plus Reaper of Souls for the amount of microtransactions that Diablo Immortal is going to ask for you in the first hour of playing it. Next up, we've got Minecraft Dungeons. I'm going to be putting that in C tier. There's nothing inherently wrong with Minecraft Dungeons. It is quite literally baby's first ARPG. If you're looking for something super casual, but actually pretty addictive, Minecraft Dungeons is great. There is depth to it. There's builds. There's a lot of fun items, and it's in that Minecraft style if you like that. If you are just trying to get a very light, relaxed experience with an ARPG, I actually would recommend Minecraft Dungeons. It's quite good. It just doesn't have the depth of the ARPG genre that I'm personally looking for, so I'll put it in the C tier. Next up is Torchlight Infinite. Now, Torchlight Infinite actually plays very similar to kind of Path of Exile in terms of you slot this skill and then you kind of connect gems into it. It's Path of Exile's gem system, but less complicated. The gameplay is very fast. It is like Path of Exile fast, and it's a really good time. The issue I have with Torchlight Infinite is it's amazing on your phone, but not as great on your computer. Would recommend playing it on your phone. I don't think it's as quite optimized and as fluid on playing on computer. But Torchlight Infinite is a really good time. I sunk quite a bit of hours into it. It's very addicting, very fast paced, and progression feels good. And it's actually got a pretty solid endgame. Next up, I'm going to be placing Torchlight 2 in A tier. Now, Torchlight 2 is just a classic ARPG. It is very old. It's probably the oldest on this list, but it's just so good. I remember playing it when I was a kid. It had everything that you wanted from an ARPG: cool classes, cool abilities, good loot, great progression, and it's definitely dated. I haven't played it in a while, but at the time, it was just one of the best ARPGs, and it's been supported for many, many years with a lot of mod support. So even after you beat the game and try all the classes, there's tons of like community-made classes and ways to play the game that there's just so much content and so much to do in the game. It's not full of microtransactions or pay-to-wins or anything. It's just a good old-fashioned ARPG, and I definitely think it deserves A tier. And now we get down to, in my opinion, the like big four ARPGs, and I'm going to be placing Diablo 3 slightly above Torchlight 2. Torchlight 2, great game. I think Diablo 3 is just a little bit more feature complete with all of its classes, and I think it's got a significantly better campaign playthrough than Torchlight 2. Diablo 3 is just the epitome of like a ARPG to blast. The classes are awesome. You can respec as much as you want. There's loadout systems. You can min-max your build to your heart's content. Diablo 3, when it launched, was not a very good game, but over the 10 plus years that it's been out, it's received so much quality of life. Unfortunately for this list, we are talking about games in their current state, and Diablo 3, after years and years of being refined, is in a fantastic state. Yes, there's a ton of power creep. It's not a very challenging ARPG, in my opinion, but it's really fun to play with friends, fun to push those greater rifts, and you can really feel yourself get more and more powerful, especially once you get those sets online. I do think the weakest part about Diablo 3, for me personally, is the sets. I think the sets are just too power crept, where they kind of hurt build diversity, whereas some other games like Diablo 4 have a little bit more build diversity, because once you get a set, it's kind of like gives you a specific playstyle and specific skills to use. But obviously, when a game's been out 10 plus years, those metas are going to become more and more narrow and more tight. Next up, we've got Diablo 4, which I'm also going to be placing in A tier. Diablo 4, while it's missing a lot of quality of life, the end game is like okay at best. I think for a game that's just come out, it's got the best visuals of any ARPG. It's got a lot of fun progression. The skills feel great. The combat feels probably the best of any of the ARPGs here. I really do think that in like a few seasons, Diablo 4 is going to be an S tier ARPG. It's just not quite there yet, honestly, just because one, the endgame content is lacking, and progression is a bit weird. My biggest gripe with Diablo 4, to be honest right now, besides like the lack of endgame diversity, is the like aspect system, where I do like aspects. I just hate how it's like, oh, if I want to change builds, I need like all of the perfect aspects, and then if I want to change back, just like experimenting with builds is a huge hassle, and getting a perfect piece of gear and not being able to use it until you find a perfect aspect, or vice versa, is just quite frustrating. So I do think Diablo 4 has a lot of work to do, but I originally ranked Diablo 3 higher than Diablo 4, and then I had a hard sit down and talk with myself, and if I was to put 500 hours into one of these games right now, I think I'd rather put Diablo 4. It's a little bit more challenging. It's got a little bit more complexity to it than D3, and there's a little bit more build experimentation, which for me is really important. Diablo 3 sets just kind of ruin a lot of build experimentation because they're so set in stone, so defined. So I really hope sets do not find their way into Diablo 4 personally. But yeah, I'm going to be putting Diablo 4 just slightly above Diablo 3 here. Next up, we've got Last Epoch, which I'm going to be putting at the very top of A tier. I think it is a better ARPG than Diablo 4, Diablo 3, and Torchlight 2, and it's not even fully out yet. It's still an early access title, which is wild. Last Epoch is probably the most fun I've had leveling a new class in, so much so that every time that I started playing the game, I'd get to the end game, and then I'd want to make a new class and do the leveling journey over and over again, and I don't do that in ARPGs. Usually, it's just kind of a slog until you get to the end game, and that's when you get to have fun. Last Epoch is so cool because of how much build diversity there is. It's got this system where when you get a skill, you get to spec into that skill tree. Every single skill has its own skill tree. When you look at Diablo 4, for example, each skill has like 2 nodes that you get to spec into. Last Epoch, each skill has got like 30 nodes that you get to spec into, and you can make your own build. One of the greatest things about this is in other games, you need to rely on your gear to do cool things. In Diablo 4, for example, you need to rely on a piece of gear that could be random dropped for your Pulverize to do a shockwave, or for your Poison Creeper to cast landslides. In Last Epoch, you can just make that happen in your skill tree. Your creativity is only bound by the skill tree, which you can freely respec and change around, and there's so much build min-maxing things to do. It also has the best crafting system, in my opinion, out of any of the ARPGs, and it's got its own built-in loot filter system, which is really good. You can write your own loot filters in the game. It's got great inventory. It's got great story progression. It's got really solid endgame. The reason Last Epoch is not in S tier, just personally, because originally I did place this in S tier, I just think it needs a little bit more endgame, and a little bit more monster density in its endgame. That's one of the big things that they've said that they're working on. But I think Last Epoch, when it releases in its 1.0 version, which by the way, it's still early access, it's still not finished, I think Last Epoch has the potential to be the best ARPG out there, in my personal opinion. It's just so great. If you haven't checked it out, I strongly would recommend checking it out right now and getting in before the game launches, so that you can get a handle for like all the different classes and abilities. And lastly, we've got Path of Exile in S tier. Path of Exile is just kind of in a tier of its own in terms of the ARPG genre. Yes, it's hard to compare all these things because like Diablo 4 hasn't even been out a year, and Path of Exile has been out 10 years, and Last Epoch hasn't even technically launched yet. But right now, we're just talking about how these games are right now. Obviously, if this was launched Path of Exile, I don't even think it would be an A tier, but Path of Exile as it stands is a current ARPG, is the ultimate hardcore ARPG fantasy. It's got so much endgame that I've played 4 seasons of it, and I haven't even done all of the endgame content. This is a game that you could spend thousands of hours playing, whereas I think you would burn out on a lot of these other things. Path of Exile's got so much build creativity and diversity that you could play every single season of this game since it's been launched and not play the same build twice. Obviously, there are metas, there are skills and builds that are very strong, and because Path of Exile is such a difficult ARPG, those metas do get like refined. But in terms of just hopping into a game and having like so many different ways to play, Path of Exile takes the cake. It's got the most interesting endgame. It's got the most endgame. It's got the most challenging bosses and most interesting bosses out of any of the ARPGs I've ever played. Its trade economy is legit insane, and I still haven't figured it out. And it just is the ultimate ARPG. There really isn't any question in my mind about that. Obviously, I do think Last Epoch and I think Diablo 4 could eventually get up to it, but Path of Exile just takes the crown right now. I do not think there's another S tier ARPG. Guys, that is going to do it for the list. Obviously, these are my opinions. Your opinions may differ. And there's games here that are like probably in the S tier that I haven't played. From what I've heard from other players, Grim Dawn and Diablo 2 would also be in S tier with Path of Exile. Just haven't put enough time into them to really rank them in this list. And Titan Quest 2 is definitely a one to keep an eye out for. But yeah, I hope this video helped you. I showed some gameplay from these different games. If they looked interesting to you, go check them out. They're all fantastic games. And yeah, guys, I will catch y'all in the next one. Take care. Peace.